Okay.
All right, so we might end up with two separate recordings. We'll have to send out a couple different links after the fact here.
I
all right, folks.
My...
Okay, cool. Folks, thanks for bearing with us. Sorry for the technical difficulties. But hopefully, can you all see my screen right now and see the message box that popped up here?
Yes. Yes.
Good deal. All right, so because I had messed with that recipient percentage and knocked that 5% down to 4%, it tells me the recipient percentages don't add up to 100 anymore. So I'm going to have to go back and make this a 5 and then come on back. And now it's going to let me go ahead and proceed. But it doesn't have anything to distribute. Let's do 100% of this. All right. So this is the screen. You guys, hopefully you guys are familiar with the screen. This is where the calculation has been made. The money has been distributed based on the percentages that we entered before. And you'll notice that this one has been modified with an extra penny. So this is another one of the changes that we've implemented here. We've had several folks say that donors complain when they have tiny amounts of funds left over that were not given away. So for whatever reason, having a penny or two left over is not acceptable. So we've added logic that redistributes any extra pennies. So it starts at the top and just starts adding pennies to each one of these until any remainders are gone. It loops through until it's gone. So.
Hey, Jeff, we did have a question about the next scheduled date. How come it allows you to have a date past the end date?
Oh, great question. I'll make a note of that.
All right.
We may have, yeah. The reason I'm not just quickly saying it's a bug is it may have been by design. Fred Armistead would remember whether or not that was the case. This doesn't make any sense to me either. So great question. I'll make a note here. But why are we allowing, past the end date? All right, I'm making a note here. Great question. I'll get an answer as soon as I can. Anyway, we've distributed the extra penny here, so this is the modified amount for this one. So this pre-validate button, we'll take a look at all four of these and make sure that that they're all ready to be processed. And it tells me that it is available for processing. But things that would invalidate it would include missing a designation if designations are required, or missing a grant type. I'm sorry, I'm pointing at the wrong thing on the defaults tab, right? But this one's ready, so I can go ahead and generate. And it's going to take a second here. The requested grants have been successfully created. I get a sort of a summary here. We've reworded the summary. The wording was confusing, and some of it was even missing before. So we fixed the wording on the log there. And then you can also see here too what the result was: created grant number, blah blah. And then if we close this, we can jump over to the grant history tab and see these four just got created. And remember, this one had the extra penny. It was 70 cents, and now it's 71. But these were the grants that just got created. Any questions on? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Is there a way to bypass those pop-ups, some of them, and just, you know how like when, like in our regular created new grant, it doesn't, we can control whether it says the grant number blah, blah, blah has been created. Is there a way to shorten some of these pop-ups so that individually you can choose which ones you want to see? Great
question. The short answer is today there's not, but I'm making a note here that there's a user setting like you're talking about. On a user by user basis, you can suppress those messages or leave them on, and I'm not sure that suppression has made it into the screen or not. So I definitely have to go check and see if that's the case. But is your general feeling there that there are too many pop-ups, too many messages?
I think there are. Especially if you're going to go to the grant history anyways to look at them. One, I think, is sufficient versus 3.
Yeah, great point. Go ahead.
I have to agree with St. Paul. We do over 800 in some of these also. We automatically go to the grants history tab because we're going to have to go into those grants too because some might have weird conditions or something like that. So it's actually pretty redundant. You obviously can see going to the grant history if it was not created or created.
Right, and all those logs that pop up, they're all here on the log tab anyway, so no point in showing it. Yeah. I'm sure at some point somebody probably asked, can I see the log immediately? Of course, it might have been Fred, too, so if that was the case, get rid of it, right? Yeah, don't tell him I said that.
Speaking of the grant history, is there a way to put it in an order and most recent created on the top versus, because we have some designated grants that are monthly, so after 3 or 4 years, you're scrolling all the way down.
Right.
But, I mean, can it hold that so that, like, every time I do one that's my setting, that it puts the most recent in front versus having to click that header all the time? Again, it's just another click every single time to get it to resort. Got
it. Great point. So yes, that should be a very easy change to add. Some of the grids in the system remember user settings. Every time you go into the Show All Grants screen, it remembers what you had done last time, right, or how you had your layout set. This is not one of those newer grids. This grid was added a long time ago, and we haven't updated it. So replacing this grid with that third-party grid, the one we call the Infragistics grids, replacing this with an Infragistics grid would be a pretty easy change to make. So I'll definitely put that on the list. Great recommendation. Making a note there. Yeah, so the pre-validation, the redistribution of pennies. Any other questions along these lines? So next, I want to jump into the batch screen and just real quickly show you a couple things we've done there on batch. So let me go ahead and save and close this one, and let's pull up designated grant batch. All right, so I want to show all, clear the filters. These are all the designated grants that I've got saved in mine. Obviously, this is a test database. Yours have hundreds and hundreds of them, I'm sure. But I've got my screen resolution set very small on this monitor, so that you guys can see, as a part of this demo. So it's not too much for you guys to see. But hopefully, you can see more than just those whenever you pull up yours. I'm going to scroll all the way to the right here to show you that we've added a grant type column. Several people had asked, could we put the grant type in this grid? And so we've added that in. But the biggest changes are here on the pre-validate and the redistribute remainders. All right, so jump back all the way to the beginning here. If I select all the designated grants and then I want to pre-validate, it's going to essentially run that pre-validation routine for every one of them and pop up and tell me. Obviously, this is test data because they all look great too. So these are all available for grant creation. But obviously, if any were wrong, it would tell you this one's missing a constituent, this one's missing a grant type, this one's amount is 0 or whatever, and it would tell you why it wasn't going to create a grant for that particular recipient. But you can pre-validate from here. That's been in there a little while. I can't remember exactly what version that's in, but that's been in there for a little while, I think. But I wanted to go ahead and show you guys that just in case you hadn't seen it. Generate grants really hadn't changed any, but now the redistribute remainder logic has been added here as well. And if we look down there at number 4, this is the one that had a penny to be redistributed. So I'm going to select them all and then hit the button here, and basically just says that the remainders have been distributed. And that changed this amount to 70. I'm going to have to go in and take a look at this logic again because that doesn't make sense. This was 71 earlier, and now it's taken it down to 70, so I'm not sure why it did that. I have to go in and revisit this logic before we release it into production. But the redistribute remainder is something that we've added in batch as well because, obviously you want to, you don't want to have to go back in and add those numbers. The ones that have a remainders, you don't have to do all those manually, so we put that in the batch screen. But I've got to go revisit this amount logic. I'm just making a note here. Any questions on batch?
Did they fix the problem with batching and it losing the characteristics? Because when we were trying to use the designated batch, the grant characteristics, some came from the recipient/payee record and some came from the fund record, and those
Right.
were not automatically populating, and we were having to key them in every single one manually for every single grant that we had attempted to do as a batch.
I can't recall off the top of my head. That didn't ring a bell. So either it was fixed a long time ago and I've already forgotten it, or we haven't addressed it. But either way, we've got code in several places that does that. So that should be a very easy one to address as well. So I'll take a look at that and see. Several of you guys have told me that you don't use the batch screens